Hello and welcome to another Stellarian Games video. In today's show we're going to be looking at building a very simple house. The focus of today's video is really to see how fast I can make a simple house. This was after I had read on the Tabletop Crafters Guild on Facebook that someone had mentioned that it was taking them a very long time to make houses. My goal was to see how fast could I actually make a house. My goal was actually to see if I could do the actual build within 30 minutes, and it took closer to an hour all the way through the black base coat. I ended up shooting this video with a clock, which is a little bit different in the frame, and I wanted to do it as a single run to see how fast I could actually do it. I will, I think, attempt this again to see if I can make a faster build, simpler build. But for this one, I figured I'll post it. This is a fairly fast build. It's an hour to build the house all the way through the black base coat, and then another 20-25 minutes to do the painting. All right, to begin with, we have a very limited number of supplies. We have a 12-inch by 24-inch piece of pink styrofoam, and some foam core, and some pre-cut 16th-inch pink foam strips. I am texturing the cutout foam with a chain to give it a texture. We'll use that texture as basically a stucco texture later on. And we're just cutting out the shape of the actual house now. Now I'm just measuring out the doors and windows on the house. These will be cut out individually, but they will be glued back into place once they've been cut out. I'm using a very sharp X-Acto knife to try to get very clean cuts on all of these. It might end up with some of the poke through on the back side, but that really doesn't matter as long as the front side has a nice clean cut. I'm leaving the windows and doors in place so that they stay with the shape that they're with and in the correct orientation. I'm taking one out at a time, shaving off about an 1/8 inch, could go up to a 1/4 inch off, to form the window, and texturing each of the windows with a little bit of glass pane texturing. The door is sliced as well and textured with some wood grain to make it look like wood panels for the door. Those are all just hot glued into place. I'm just putting a little bit of hot glue in the back to kind of hold it in place. The rest of the paint should hold it in place with the Mod Podge later on. I'm cutting a little strip out of the backside of the ends of the house. This way, the overlapping section is only about a 1/4 inch revealed. I can use that 1/4 inch to make it look like a wood log corner of the stucco home, and that 1/4 inch is a nice size. I've done a 1/2 inch in the past and it works, but I think the 1/4 inch looks a little bit nicer. It's a little more work, but I think it's worth it. Now I'm texturing some of those pre-cut 16th inch strips and then slicing them in half and adding them as more wood log looks to the stucco to frame the stucco building. I'm using tacky glue for this just because it's a little bit easier than the hot glue. I could use hot glue, it would stick a little bit faster, but I thought the tacky would set up fast enough for the paint to dry or to be painted once I got to that point. I'm adding some little angle detail of the wood on the side of the house. I think that'll look nice as well. Now I'm moving on to the roof section. I'm using just 1/4 inch foam core. I cut it at a bevel and cut it about the right size, hot gluing those panels into place. And then I'm going to use the pre-cut strips again and attach those to the roof. I'm using the same method that I used in the first video, the 001 video, where the individual shingles will be cut out of this at a later point, or textured into this roof. Right now I'm just focusing on gluing it into place, and then I'll cut the extra off, and those can be used on another roof later on. I'm using these pre-cut 16th inch strips simply because those take quite a while to do, so I just cut a bunch of those at a time and have those handy for projects like these. I'm going in and texturing each of the individual shingle boards, using a pencil to do the texturing. And I realized after I started doing the painting that I didn't do the texture with the steel brush on the shingles. I think it turned out fine without that texture, but you could just run a steel brush down those shingles to give it a little bit more of a wood grain texture. Now I'm coming along with an X-Acto and cutting out kind of irregularly along each of the rows of shingles, so that there's a little bit of unevenness to the bottom row of the shingles. This is a pretty time-consuming component of the roof, and I'm looking, if I want a shorter build on the next one, this is probably an area where I'll look at shaving down the time. Probably a different style roof rather than these wood shingles. I'm just framing the edge of the foam core on the ends. I'm not bothering with the bottom edge. Again, trying to just cut corners a little bit to make this build fast. If you saw when we started the video, it started at 9:30, and so I was trying to keep an eye on the clock to beat that hour mark, and right now we're getting down to about 50 minutes worth of building on this project. This is the last of the little bit of foam core that's going on. I'm just drawing a little bit more of the detail, and that's about it. Now I'm just clearing out the work surface so that I can do the Mod Podge painting. This is just Mod Podge with black paint mixed in and giving the whole thing a coat. The Mod Podge really helps give it a nice hard shell, protects the piece a little bit, and I think it's worth using the Mod Podge rather than regular paint. I also feel that the Mod Podge helps seal in the black Sharpie that I use to do a lot of the lines. I've done pieces where I don't use the Mod Podge and some of that Sharpie ends up bleeding through the paint. That isn't a very good result, so I think the Mod Podge is a little bit better for sealing that in. All right, so that's just under an hour, and we got the piece fully constructed and black based. And the next step will go into the actual painting. So I did this on a second night just to let the Mod Podge cure overnight. I'm putting on a white coat of paint first. It's a pretty heavy dry brush. It's probably 80-90% coverage on the dry brush. And I'm doing this first coat dry brushing. I came back later on and did a second coat of the white as well, just adding a little bit more to that dry brush. So now I'm kind of going back over and adding that second coat. I'm switching colors to a dark brown and just hitting all of the wood elements on the building, the door, the frames, the wood posts, and the roof, and underneath the roof ledge as well. All of that's just getting a very dark brown. This isn't really a dry brush, this is a pretty solid coat. Now I'm switching to the windows. I'm using just a blue. I know that a lot of people don't really like the blue windows. I've done this on a number of pieces. I sort of like the look. It's a little bit cartoonish, but the blue windows, and then I come back and hit it with a little bit of watered down blue and white, and it kind of adds a kind of a glow to the window, as if there might be lights inside it if it was a night scene. Now I'm coming through with a lighter kind of a orange tan color and doing a dry brush over the roof tiles, the shingles, so that it's really hitting in a single direction to accentuate the grain, but it's also hitting the edges of those roof tiles and giving it a nice overall tone to the piece. Ends up being a little bit cartoonish, but it fits in with the other pieces that I have. Now I'm just detailing some of the brown where the white got onto some of the boards. Now the last step is just giving black wash. This ended up being a little bit heavier than I was thinking it should be, especially on the white. I came back through with a paper towel and cleaned up a little bit of that black wash, just so that it ended up in the crevices. So this is the final view of the home with the black wash dried. I particularly like this simple house. I think it's a good build for an hour, but I think I will try to do a shorter one. So stay tuned. Hopefully we'll get a shorter one with similar results.